All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video, the latest on Brandon Aiyuk. The Aiyuk story will not go away until he actually formally signs his contract or there's some resolution. So we'll give you the latest and the greatest and what's going on around the world as far as Brandon Aiyuk. And of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week. From 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. But don't roll in at 7:45 and think you're getting everything you want because they do run out. Pig and a Pickle, go say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them that Krug sent you. Get some brisket chili. It's all amazing, by the way. The potato salad, amazing. The white cheddar mac and cheese is amazing. The salad's amazing. You can't go wrong at Pig and a Pickle. And, of course, this video also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Check the link in the description. Use the promo code Krug. And they will match you up to your first $100. All right, let's talk a little bit about the latest on Brandon Aiyuk because there are multiple stories out there right now, multiple little information out there as far as the Niners wide receiver. You can make an argument that the Niners drafted Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing, that they decided they couldn't afford Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk long term. And they wanted to have more receivers, and thus they drafted Pearsall in round 1 and Cowing in round 4. And that could just be, them replacing these guys in the draft before they actually replace them on the field. Now, the 49ers are trying to do what is kind of the unthinkable. I mean, last year's Niners became only the 7th team in the history of the Super Bowl to lose the game after having a 10-point lead. So it was a painful Super Bowl Sunday for the 49ers and their fans. Now the Niners are trying to run it back. Now they're trying to do an incredibly difficult thing, and that's be one of the teams that loses the Super Bowl and then comes back and wins it the very next year. And here's the fact on that. Only 3 of the previous 56 Super Bowl losers from the previous year came back to win the Super Bowl the next season. So the odds are very much stacked against the 49ers. Offensively, if they bring their receivers back, if Aiyuk comes back, they will return all 11 starters from an offensive unit that ranks 2nd in the NFL in yards gained and 3rd in the NFL in points scored. So it's a really, really good offense with Brock Purdy entering only his 2nd full season. He just had his first full-time offseason of his NFL career. And last year, Purdy became the Niners' first Pro Bowl quarterback in over 20 years. You got to go back to 2002, the last time the Niners had a Pro Bowl quarterback. So he was incredible last year. He set the franchise record for single-season passing yards. He posted the 14th highest passer rating in the history of the NFL. And a lot of that's because the Niners have elite weapons. The Niners last year were the first team in the history of the NFL to have a running back, a tight end, and 2 wide receivers all gain at least 1,000 yards from scrimmage. So if they bring everybody back, they're pretty stacked on offense. There's really no way around that. It's a really good offensive team. So, and then you sit there and you say, well, there's a lot of people that have said, well, why is Aiyuk not signed? I can't believe he's not signed. Where's the urgency? I mean, it's June the 20th. And if you look at this regime, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, and look at when they've signed guys, we really should not be surprised that it is, mid to late June and Aiyuk is not signed. George Kittle signed his deal on August the 13th in 2020. Fred Warner signed his big deal on July the 21st of 2021. Deebo signed his deal on July the 31st of 2022. Last year, Bosa signed his deal. It wasn't until September the 6th of 2023. So it's not like you can sit there and go, well, I don't understand what's going on here. Why is Aiyuk not signed? This is kind of the way the Niners play it. They're hard negotiators and they play it out until the middle of the summer and sometimes, the early fall to make sure they get the players that they want, not just that they want, but they want on their price. So let's talk a little bit about the 49ers situation. I mean, you're seeing right now around the NFL some standouts, electing not to go to the mandatory minicamp. So Brandon Aiyuk, didn't go to mandatory minicamp. Ceedee Lamb of the Cowboys holding out, didn't go to mandatory minicamp. Micah Parsons in Dallas didn't go to mandatory minicamp. And they'll all be subject to fines for their absences. But we've seen holdouts kind of be an effective way to help players get paid. If you're an NFL player and you want to get paid, there's very little you can do to create any kind of leverage or urgency. So a lot of times the Niners' way has been play hardball, especially early on, and don't worry if this thing drags into the late summer, or in Bosa's case, he signed like 3 or 4 days before the Niners took on the Steelers in week 1. So last year he sat out until early September. He eventually became the highest paid defender in league history. He signed a 5-year, $170 million deal to stay with the Niners. And then there were other guys. It's not like this is only happening in San Francisco. Zach Martin held out for a big deal. Chris Jones in Kansas City held out. He got a big deal. Jonathan Taylor held out in Indianapolis. Eventually, he got signed to a significant deal. These guys have all held out ahead of last year, and they all got contracts. So that's just kind of been the way it's gone for the most part. Now, there's multiple stories out there. One, Albert Breer says he's optimistic that the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk get the deal done. Breer says that he's optimistic that Aiyuk and the 49ers will get a deal done. He went on Colin Cowherd's show on FS1, The Herd, and Colin says he doesn't believe that Aiyuk's going to be with the Niners beyond the trade deadline. That the two sides have struggled to find common ground, and that they're at an impasse. And, obviously the pressure is going to ramp up as training camp approaches. But Cowherd believes that Aiyuk is going to be traded and that he's totally replaceable. And he basically cited the fact that the Niners drafted Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing, and then re-signed Jawan Jennings, and have already signed Debo. And he thinks that Aiyuk's not long for San Francisco. Albert Breer went on his show, and here was the quote from Breer. He says, "I think there are two things that I would say give you some optimism that he could still be there after the trade deadline." He says, number one is that they did the deal with Christian McCaffrey. They did that one aggressively. And I think they had to do McCaffrey before they did Aiyuk, because if you pay Aiyuk 29, 30, 31 million per year, now the price for CMC might go up. So you had to take care of CMC first. He also commented on a report by Mike Silver of the Chronicle, stating that the 49ers' last offer to Aiyuk was likely somewhere in the range of 26 million AAV. Breer told Cowherd, he said, that's not far off. And a lot of times these things get ugliest towards the end. And the Debo thing was not clean until it was at the very end. And I would tell you this, I do feel strongly about this part of it. I think if you fed John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, truth serum, and asked them, who would you rather have here on the roster, Debo or Aiyuk, going forward, I think they would answer Aiyuk. They love Debo. Debo can do a lot of different things for them, but Debo is like a supercharged gadget player. Aiyuk is more of a typical number one wide receiver who can beat man coverage and you can build an offense around. And so do I think they're going to go to Justin Jefferson numbers to get Aiyuk signed? No. And if Aiyuk draws a line in the sand there and says, I'm not going to take less than Jefferson money to sign, then maybe he is traded. But if there is some level of compromise, I still think the 49ers would like to get something done with Aiyuk, and I don't think the door is closed on that. So, as we know, I mean, Aiyuk's currently scheduled to make $14.1 million on the 5th-year option, and he's got a contract. The Niners really don't owe him anything. They've offered him the 5th-year option. He can play this year at 14.1, and they can take care of this next year if that's the way they want to play it. The Niners, of course, can save money against the cap this year if they can sign Aiyuk to a long-term deal. So if they want him long-term, they're definitely motivated to get a deal done because they can lower his cap number and they can create more salary cap flexibility and roll over more of their cap to pay Purdy next year. And we don't know. Who knows? I don't know if the Niners are willing to go over 26 million. I really don't. So that's the one report. Breer went on with Cowherd, and he says yeah, no deal's done, but we're optimistic a deal's going to get done. Then there's Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network, and he's acknowledging obviously the Niners and Aiyuk are at the stalemate, and they haven't come to an agreement on a contract. And according to the reports, Aiyuk could be seeking a contract in the range of 30 to 35 million, which would be more than double what he's scheduled to earn this year on the fifth-year option. The Niners' last contract offer, according to Silver, was $26 million. So if he does want 30 or 35, they could be quite a ways away, and they may be at an impasse. But Pelissero went on the Rich Eisen show, and he discussed, the video that we saw earlier this week where Aiyuk was talking with Jaden Daniels, and Pelissero's quote was, he says, listen, the 49ers have spent the offseason trying to get a contract done. He has the same agent, actually, as Tua Tagovailoa. They haven't been able to this point to figure out exactly what that number should be. We've seen all these massive contracts getting done. Amon-Ra St. Brown at $28 million, Justin Jefferson at $35 million. But Pelissero went on to say he believes Aiyuk aims to land somewhere between Jefferson's 35 and Amon-Ra's 28. So he says that the target is somewhere between 28 and 35, which is probably, common sense to all of us and something that the rest of us could assume. And Pelissero went on to say, if you're the 49ers, you're saying you haven't had the productivity that Amon-Ra St. Brown has. It's not that we don't want you back. If he interprets, hey, we're not going to give you $34 million a year as we don't want you back, that's fine. And that's Brandon Aiyuk's right. The reality is he's under contract for about $14 million this year with the 49ers. Pelissero also noted that, that other teams expressed interest around the draft, that no team made a good enough offer to make the Niners want to pull the trigger. And he thinks it would have taken a first-round pick and more to get Aiyuk out of San Francisco. And Pelissero went on to say, well, now the draft is gone. The 49ers were in the Super Bowl last season. They're pressing to try to win it all in 2024. The idea that they're going to flip around and just get rid of Brandon Aiyuk seems a little bit convenient to a player who obviously has a relationship with Jaden Daniels going back to the Arizona State days. Pelissero went on to say, I can't sit here and say for certain that Brandon Aiyuk will be a member of the 49ers this season. I also think right now it's hard to imagine that he's not. Anything can happen, but he either needs to show up for training camp or failing that for the season, or else he's going to just be missing out on close to $1 million paycheck every week. If he plays out this season, he probably gets tagged again or gets tagged in 2025. So it's, it really is interesting. Pelissero concluded, he said, we'll see where things go when they reconvene closer to training camp on July the 23rd. But I would say right now, the arrows are pointing towards Brandon Aiyuk being a part of the team in 2024, and then we'll see from there. So you got Pelissero, reporting saying that, anything can happen. And I heard the TikTok with Jaden Daniels, but he thinks, Aiyuk is going to remain with the 49ers. Now, Aiyuk doesn't have tons of leverage. He can't hold out for the whole year and nothing advances. Basically, if he doesn't play this year, he's exactly in the exact same situation that he's in this year, next year. So there's that report, or there's that fact. So he's probably going to play this year. The question is, when's he going to report? And are the Niners going to budge? Is he going to play on the fifth-year option? Or are they going to work out a compromise and pay him something between 28.5 and 35 million AAV and work it out? Now, the other story that's out there, earlier this month, Ray Fittipaldo, who writes for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, he expressed confidence that the Steelers would eventually find a way to trade for either Debo or Aiyuk. And then weeks later, according to Josh Garney of Steelers Depot, Fittipaldo went on his radio show and discussed the possibility of the Steelers landing one of the Niner receivers, specifically Aiyuk. And here's the quote. He says, I think for the Steelers, I think they're interested, but they're interested at their price. And I think what Omar Khan is going to do is he's going to wait until it gets really uncomfortable for John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. This was on 97.3 The Fan that Fittipaldo made these comments. Then he goes on to say, and if you've noticed, Aiyuk is kind of starting to make it uncomfortable for the 49ers, referring to the video that he just produced with Jaden Daniels. So, it's interesting. Fittipaldo went on to say, so I think deadlines always spur these deals, right? As the season gets closer, I think the 49ers might have a little bit more urgency in moving him. But yeah, listen, guys, it's been out there since March. We've known this has been a thing since March. And I think if it's going to happen, it's probably not going to happen in June. I think it's going to happen probably closer to training camp or the start of the season. And of course, as we said, the Niners have the leverage. He's under contract and on the 5th-year option. And next year, the Niners can utilize the franchise tag. And the Niners have enough cap room. I mean, the Niners currently have approximately 32.7 in cap room, 6th most cap room in the NFL, according to overthecap.com. So, so Aiyuk's got limited options. That's really it. Unless he wants to sit out the entire season and put significant pressure on the Niners who are trying to win now. What Aiyuk risks is failing to accrue a season and pushing his 5th-year option to next year and putting the receiver, as I said, in the exact same situation that he's in right now. So, it really is interesting. Ian Rappaport weighed in on this as well. He said he went on the NFL Network and he's talking about the 49ers. He said they just want him at their price. It is not a negotiation, to my knowledge, that has been completely dead. They just have not done a deal yet. And it's pretty clear that Brandon Aiyuk wants the kind of money that Amon-Ra St. Brown ended up making, about $28 million on average over the first 3 years of the deal. The 49ers are not there yet. So that is kind of where we sit. Now, the other point that I think I'd like to bring up here, and that is that there was an article on Bleacher Report, and the article was about 4 deals. There was one like this on Aiyuk, but there was like 4 deals that the Cowboys will not be able to say no to for Ceedee Lamb. And I don't know about you, but I kind of see Ceedee Lamb and Aiyuk as the one and the same. Some people think Aiyuk's better. Other people think Lamb's better. I think if you said, really grade out the 2 receivers, I'd say Lamb is better when the ball's in the air and a little bit more competitive at the catch point. I think Aiyuk is a longer athlete, stronger athlete, tougher, can take a bigger hit, better run after the catch. I think Aiyuk you can throw it to him short and he can, really rumble. When you get to that 3rd, 4th step for Aiyuk, he's got power and speed going at the same time, where Lamb is a damn good receiver, one of the best in the NFL. And he's great. He's got great ball skills. He'll catch it in a crowd. He'll go up in the air and get it. He's got a huge catch radius. But I would say they're very similar players. So anyway, I bring this up because there were 4 deals mentioned as deals that would somehow attract the Cowboys to pull the trigger on trading Ceedee Lamb. And 2 of them, I think I would very much consider if I were the 49ers for Brandon Aiyuk. The first one is it would be, in this case, they're talking about Ceedee Lamb, but I'm saying Brandon Aiyuk to the Chargers for Ladd McConkey and a 1st-round pick. All right, well, if your cap problems are severe, and since you're probably on the verge, you've got a deep roster with stars everywhere, you're on the verge of paying your quarterback $60 million a year next year. And it could go up, but it's looking like 55 to 60 million is going to be the floor on a Brock Purdy contract. Jed's ready for it. The Niners are ready for it. Brock's obviously, I'm sure, anticipating it. But that is a huge, huge sum of money. In a cap sport, the Niners are going to be up against it because their quarterback's going from $900,000 this year to maybe $60 million next year. So they're hugged up against the cap, and they're going to be looking for cap relief anywhere they can find it. And so you look around their team, I think in some ways the wide receivers, Aiyuk and Debo, even though we love them and even though they're great, that those are the guys that probably are the easiest to replace. And so if the Chargers came knocking for Aiyuk and they offered Ladd McConkey and a first round pick, that'd be hard to pass up. It'd be hard to pass up. McConkey, I think, is a decent receiver. He's got 4.3 speed. He can play the slot. He played well at Georgia, and you're getting a first round pick. Now, granted, that first round pick could be 25 or 33 or between 25 and 32 because the Chargers, I think, are going to be a playoff team and maybe a Super Bowl contender. And if they make this trade and get Aiyuk, that only helps them become a Super Bowl contender. So would you trade Aiyuk to the Chargers for Ladd McConkey and a late first round pick? Okay, that's one deal. I think in the night, if I just was judging Aiyuk's talent against McConkey's talent and the first rounder, I'd say don't do it. But when you really think about the backdrop of the 49ers are hugged up against the cap next year, and they're going to have to pay their quarterback a ridiculous sum of money, and they're going to need cap room everywhere they can find it. Moving on from Aiyuk and getting a receiver as talented as McConkey to go with Pearsall and Cowing and Debo and JJ and everybody else you have. And I was just watching the Super Bowl again the other night, Super Bowl 58. Chris Conley has become a very useful player for the 49ers as a special teamer, as a coverage player on special teams. He made a number of catches in the playoffs in the Super Bowl. He might be, if you wind up staying with Aiyuk and Debo and you just draft, you're probably cutting Chris Conley. You're probably going to wind up having to cut him. So you have depth at wide receiver that is really, really pretty good. And you might not be, the reality is the 49ers in their cap situation over the next couple of years may not be able to afford Debo or Aiyuk. So this whole, who's going to stay, who's going to go, they may both have to go. Just because of where the cap is, where Purdy's cap number is, that might be their reality and nobody's talking about it. The other deal here that Bleacher Report had, I think, is even more intriguing, and it's high risk, high reward. And once again, it's, for older Niner fans who remember Carmen Policy trading Charles Haley to the Cowboys, when you hear the Green Bay Packers discussed, you want to just scream, no. But this is the deal they threw out on Bleacher Report for CeeDee Lamb. Romeo Doubs or Christian Watson plus Jaden Reed and a second rounder in next year's draft. Now, that's interesting. Doubs went to Nevada. He's a tremendous receiver. I really love Doubs. Watson is a little bit of a risk because there's been some injuries there. He only played 9 games last year. But he's awfully big and awfully fast and very talented. And then Jaden Reed is I don't know if he wants to leave, Green Bay because he played at Michigan State right there, and then he gets drafted by the Packers. So he's basically very comfortable, I'm sure, in the Midwest there. But I'd take Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, and a second-round pick for Brandon Aiyuk and send him to Green Bay. Now, it would make Green Bay would have a great running back, 2 great tight ends. They would now have Christian Watson and Brandon Aiyuk. Not to mention Dontavian Wicks and Bo Melton and the other weapons they have there. They just got the Raiders, premier running back in free agency. They just invested in their offensive line in the first round. So it's a risk, but I'd go 2 for 1 on Aiyuk to get Doubs and Jaden Reed. Watson's a little riskier because, it's high risk, high reward, but it's riskier. Doubs is not Aiyuk, but he's a very, very good receiver with great hands. And he's 24. And Jaden Reed's a really good slot receiver who I believe led Green Bay in receptions last year. And he's 23. And if the Niners situation is really so severe on the cap, like I think it is, that they may not be able to afford long-term Aiyuk or Debo, this might be the best route to go. It might be you trade Aiyuk to the Packers, you get Romeo Doubs, you get Jaden Reed, you get a second-round pick in next year's draft. They get a great player, but you go 2 for 1, and Brock Purdy might be able to make magic with Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed. Both those guys have great ball skills. Both those guys are really good young receivers. So I thought that was an interesting offer. It's like you say, do I want to send Aiyuk to Green Bay? No, I don't want to send Aiyuk to Green Bay. But do I want to send Aiyuk to Green Bay if I can get my choice of Romeo Doubs or Christian Watson and Jaden Reed and a 2025 second-round pick? I'm making that move. I'm not blinking. I love Aiyuk, but if I can get Doubs and Jaden Reed in the second rounder, I'm doing it. And I'm getting down the road. And my cap problem is suddenly, doesn't exist anymore because I've moved Aiyuk on. Now, is there a chance Aiyuk beats the Niners in the playoffs and becomes a Super Bowl champion and the whole thing blows up in the Niners' face? Yeah. But there's also, it might be the best way for them to extend their championship window and to keep their core intact. I mean, really, that's what John Lynch is doing right now. They took over the team. They didn't buy the team. They took over the team, got hired. They had to clear up the old cap and start drafting players. Now they got the roster they want. They've had a couple bites of the apple. They've lost twice in the Super Bowl. They've lost twice in the NFC Championship game. They're desperate to climb to the top of the mountain. Now, when John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan and Parag Marathe meet behind the scenes, they're looking at their star-studded deep roster, and they're saying, how do we keep this train on the tracks? How do we keep this thing rolling? And maybe trading Aiyuk in a 2-for-1 for two good young receivers like Doubs and Reed or Watson and Reed and getting a day 2 pick, that might be the way to go. Or maybe sending him to the Chargers for Ladd McConkey in a first. That might be the way to go. Definitely would be cheaper. So lots of things on the Aiyuk front. Nothing is finalized. Who knows? A lot of the insiders feel like eventually it will get done. I hope eventually it gets done. But I'll say this. If those Bleacher Report trades that are out there for CeeDee Lamb, if those same deals are out there for Brandon Aiyuk, I'm pulling the trigger. I'll take McConkey and Chargers first. I'll take Doubs and Reed and Green Bay's 2025 second. I'd love to hear what you have to say. So give me your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video. Check the link in the description. Use the promo code Krug, and they'll match you up to your first $100. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.